surgeon. First thing to discuss quickly.
I started transtuberosical, but I left it, and I always go infra right now.
So I'm from the school of Ronald van Heerwaarden, so I take the tubercle off, but more recently I've been going supra.
Infra for me too. So what is your landmark, Jörg? And I think it's something that is not really described. Compared to the top of the tubercle, to start shooting your key wires. For the first resection key wire, the upper one.
The proximal wire, I was afraid in the beginning that the patellar tendon could disrupt if you don't leave it enough space. Right now, what I see, if you get about 2 centimeters below the tube tip, it's enough, and I didn't see a patellar tendon rupture in that. 2 centimeters below.
Mirco?
Yeah, for me it's pretty important really the shape of the knee. So sometimes you have a very small shape, and then you need enough space in the proximal part for your plate. This is important, I think. So for the direction of the screws. So therefore, I think it's not completely easy. And another point I think it's very important is you have your tunnel. And Jörg, you always mention most of the time we do a tunnel filling together with a slope correction. And the tunnel is something which is the weak point for the tube tip. And if you have a very short distance to the tube tip, then it's very small, and then you have maybe a big tunnel on the tibia, and when the tunnel is pretty high, then there is a risk of a rupture, of a fracture. And I had one case, I had a rupture, the fracture of the tube tip, because it was very near to the tunnel was really big, and my osteotomy was too high, too proximal. Okay. And this is something I've learned in the past, that in these cases I try to be a little bit more distant.
And aren't you afraid about the shape? I can probably show an X-ray. This one, for example. Are you afraid about the shape of the tibia? So this is a case of mine. Pre-op, 1 month, 3 months. Aren't you afraid about this step anterior, just behind the tibial tuberosity? So this guy got a BTB as a second revision. This way you have this weird aspect on the post-op. I did the 2 centimeter below the tip tubercle, as we always do. Are you afraid about this shape of this small step just behind of the tibia? Because it's one of the, if you look at the literature, we're going to discuss in the 5 last minute about the literature a bit. The only thing that for me remained an issue and a question is what will happen in 3 years regarding this weird tibial proximal aspect, because we have this step just below the proximal tib fib. Are you afraid of that?
Not really. No.
You have the
Not in closing wedge, only in the open wedge. When you have a posterior, then it can.